Excuse me, sir. Is there a problem here? The voice, sharp and laced with impatience, cut through the low hum of the Grand Majestic Hotel lobby. Captain Kyle Evans, his Marine Corps dress blues, a symphony of midnight blue and scarlet, stood within posture so rigid it seemed carved from stone. His medals, a neat, colorful block on his chest, gleamed under the crystal chandeliers. Flanked by two younger Marines who mirrored his ramrod stillness, he directed his question at the old man standing before the check-in desk. Marcus Reeves, 86 years old, did not turn immediately. He seemed to be listening to a sound only he could hear, a distant echo from another time. He wore simple khaki pants and a worn leather jacket, the kind that had molded itself to its owner over decades of use. His granddaughter Lily, a young woman in her early 20s, placed a protective hand on his arm. "No, Captain, no problem at all," she said, her voice bright but strained. "We're just checking in. My grandfather was invited to the ball tonight." Captain Evans' gaze drifted from Marcus's weathered face down to the faded leather of his jacket, lingering on a small circular patch on the sleeve. It was so frayed that the image on it was nearly indecipherable. A faint smirk touched the captain's lips. This was the Marine Corps birthday ball, an evening of tradition and honor, where the Corps celebrated its legacy with those who had earned the right to stand in that sacred space. But to Captain Evans, scanning the lobby with the practiced eye of a gatekeeper, the old man in civilian clothes appeared utterly out of place. The captain's voice took on the tone of someone explaining obvious rules to a confused stranger. "This event is strictly for active duty personnel and distinguished veterans, miss. We have protocols." The general's guest list was very specific. Lily produced the engraved invitation from her purse, her hands trembling slightly as she held it out. "My grandfather is Marcus Reeves. General Morrison personally invited him." Evans took the card with barely concealed skepticism, his eyes skimming the formal script without really reading it. "Reeves," he repeated flatly, as if testing the weight of a name he found lacking. "I don't recall seeing that on the confirmed list this morning." His lie was smooth, practiced, delivered with the confidence of a man who knew his authority was the only truth that mattered in this moment. Around them, the steady flow of guests in formal attire began to slow, then stop. Conversations quieted to whispers as heads turned toward the unfolding confrontation. The marble lobby, with its soaring ceilings and glittering chandeliers, became a stage, and every guest an unwitting audience member drawn to the drama. Marcus remained absolutely still throughout the exchange, his weathered hands resting lightly on the polished counter. His pale blue eyes held a quality that was difficult to define, a depth that seemed to absorb everything while revealing nothing. The silence that emanated from him was not the confusion of senility, as Evans interpreted it, but something far more profound. It was the quiet of a man who had learned long ago that words were often unnecessary, that stillness could speak louder than any argument. This restraint only deepened Evans's irritation. He had expected deference, perhaps even gratitude, that he was bothering to address them at all. Instead, the old man's calm indifference felt like a challenge, an affront to the authority symbolized by his uniform and rank. Evans moved closer, his voice dropping into a register meant to intimidate. "What unit did you serve with, Mr. Reeves? Were you at Chosin? Incheon, perhaps? I'm certain you have fascinating stories to share, but this venue is reserved for those whose service meets a particular standard of distinction." The insult was surgical, wrapped in politeness but designed to wound. Lily's face flushed crimson. "My grandfather served with honor," she said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "He has every right to be here." The captain's expression shifted into something resembling sympathy, which was somehow worse than open contempt. "I understand your pride, miss, but we can't simply allow any who claims military service to attend an official function of this importance." He gestured dismissively at Marcus's jacket and the faded patch on its sleeve. No uniform, no proper identification, no visible evidence of rank or commendation. For all I know, this could be purchased from any surplus store. The humiliation hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Lily felt tears building behind her eyes, fury and helplessness warring inside her chest. But Marcus seemed untouched by the verbal assault, his gaze drifting past Evans toward the tall windows overlooking the city lights. It was as though the entire scene, This public degradation, orchestrated by a younger man in pressed blues, was merely a ripple on the surface of much deeper waters. His detachment, this refusal to engage or defend himself, pushed Evans past reason. He stepped directly into Marcus's personal space, close enough that his breath disturbed the air between them. His voice became a low hiss meant for everyone to hear. "I'm trying to maintain respect here, old man, but you're testing my patience. You and your granddaughter need to leave immediately." Then he reached out, his index finger tapping the worn fabric of the mysterious patch with deliberate mockery. "What even is this thing? Some tourist souvenir?" The instant Evans' finger made contact with those faded threads, something extraordinary happened inside Marcus's mind. The sterile hotel lobby dissolved like mist, replaced by a sensory assault so vivid it felt more real than the present moment. The thunderous percussion of helicopter rotors beating tropical air into submission filled his ears. The sharp tang of aviation fuel mixed with the rich smell of wet jungle earth invaded his nostrils. And there, as clear as the day it was sown, he saw that same patch in its original glory, bright and menacing on the weathered metal skin of a Huey gunship. The design was unmistakable now. A coiled serpent with fangs exposed, wrapped possessively around a jagged lightning bolt. The image vibrated with barely contained violence, a promise of swift and deadly force. Then reality snapped back like a rubber band, and Marcus was once again standing in the elegant lobby, surrounded by uncomfortable silence and hostile stares. Across the expansive space, leaning against a marble pillar near the administrative wing, Gunnery Sergeant Miller had been watching the entire confrontation with growing disgust. At 58, retired from active service but working as the hotel's head of security, Miller had seen countless Marines pass through these doors. He knew the difference between earned confidence and hollow arrogance. Captain Evans represented everything that troubled him about the modern peacetime military: officers who understood regulations but not honor, who wielded rank like a weapon against those who couldn't fight back. More importantly, Miller recognized something in the old man's eyes that Evans was too blind to see. It was the look of men who had been tested in fires that consumed lesser souls, who had survived when survival should have been impossible. He'd seen that exact expression in the weathered faces of drill instructors at Paris Island, legendary Marines who spoke little but commanded absolute respect through their mere presence. Miller stepped forward, clearing his throat with authority. "Captain," he said, his voice carrying the gravel of decades of service. "Everything all right here? General Morrison is expecting Mr. Reeves." Evans turned on him with venom in his eyes. "I have this situation under control, Sergeant. Return to your post." The deliberate use of his former rank was a power play, a reminder that even in civilian life, Evans held superior status. Miller's jaw muscles tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. He knew that pressing further would only escalate the situation, potentially making things worse for the elderly veteran. Evans was riding a wave of authority-drunk ego, and he wouldn't stop until he'd reached his desired conclusion. With a barely perceptible nod toward Marcus, a silent gesture of solidarity and apology, Miller retreated back toward the shadows near the administrative offices. But he didn't reach for his radio to summon the hotel security team. This situation had escalated beyond what rent-a-cops could handle. This required intervention from someone with real authority. Pulling his personal cell phone from his jacket pocket, Miller's thumb moved across the screen with purpose. He dialed a number he'd memorized but rarely used, a direct emergency line given to him by the General's Chief of Staff. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. "Colonel Henderson, sir, this is Gunny Miller at the Grand Majestic," Miller said, keeping his voice low and urgent. "You need to get down to the lobby immediately." "I'm heading to the ballroom, Gunny. What's the situation?" "There's an incident developing, sir. Captain Evans is confronting one of the General's invited guests. It's getting ugly." "Evans?" The Colonel's tone sharpened with recognition. "Who's the guest?" Miller took a breath. "His name is Marcus Reeves, sir." The silence that followed stretched across the phone line like a chasm opening in the earth. In his temporary command office on the hotel's executive floor, Colonel Henderson stood frozen, his mind racing to process what he'd just heard. That name, Marcus Reeves, echoed in his head with the weight of classified history. "Gunny," the Colonel's voice emerged tight and strained. All traces of his earlier impatience evaporated. "Did you say Marcus Reeves? Confirm that name." "Yes, sir, that's correct," Miller replied from the lobby. Henderson dropped the phone into its cradle without ceremony. His hands flew to his laptop keyboard, accessing a heavily encrypted database that required 3 separate authentication protocols. He typed the name with shaking fingers. The search returned a single file, most of its contents obscured by thick black redaction bars that marked information beyond top secret. But one line remained visible under operational designation, stark and undeniable: Project Viper. The colonel felt ice water flood his veins. He grabbed his desk phone and hammered the direct line to General Morrison's suite. "Sir," he said, abandoning all protocol and pleasantries, "you need to come to the lobby right now." "Henderson, what is it? Can this wait?" The general's voice carried the distraction of a man preparing for an important evening. "Absolutely not, sir. It concerns Marcus Reeves. Captain Evans has detained him in the main lobby." The silence from the general's end was profound and terrible. It was the silence of a man confronting ghosts he thought were safely buried in the classified archives of history. "Get my security detail," the general commanded, his voice transforming into something cold and dangerous. "Service elevator. 2 minutes. And Henderson, you tell Evans that if he lays one finger on that man, if he so much as breathes wrong in his direction, I will personally destroy his career." "Had that clear?" "Crystal, sir," Henderson replied, but Morrison had already disconnected. The colonel shouted for his aide. "Tell the sergeant major it's about Iron Viper." Back in the lobby, Captain Evans had reached the apex of his perceived victory. The crowd stood in uncomfortable silence. Lily appeared on the verge of tears, and Marcus remained an island of unreadable calm. Evans leaned close to the old man, his voice dripping with theatrical contempt designed to carry to the watching audience. "Look, this has gone on quite long enough. You want to play soldier? Fine." He straightened, a cruel smile spreading across his face like oil. "On water. Tell you what, every real warrior has a call sign. What was yours?" "Let me guess, Gramps." "The old man, maybe Relic?" He laughed at his own joke, though the 2 junior Marines behind him shifted with visible discomfort, their instincts telling them something was deeply wrong with this situation. Lily opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus finally moved. He raised one weathered hand, not in threat but in gentle command, and Lily fell silent. Then he lifted his head, and for the first time his pale blue eyes focused entirely on Captain Evans. The placid calm evaporated, replaced by something ancient and forged in fire. When Marcus spoke, his voice was not the trembling rasp of advanced age. It was quiet, yes, but it carried the texture of grinding stone, the timbre of a voice that had issued commands in screaming chaos and been instantly obeyed. "My call sign," Marcus Reeves said, each word dropping into the dead silence like fragments of ice, "was Iron Viper." At that precise instant, the grand entrance doors exploded inward. They weren't open. They were commanded open with force that made every person in the lobby snap to attention. General Morrison, his 2 stars gleaming on perfectly pressed dress blues, his chest a fortress of ribbons earned across 35 years of service, strode into the space with the focused intensity of an incoming missile. His sergeant major and 4 Marine security personnel moved with him, their synchronized movement speaking of countless hours of professional training. The lobby, already quiet, descended into tomb-like stillness. Captain Evans froze completely, his smirk dissolving as the blood drained from his face, leaving him the color of old parchment. The general's eyes, burning with an intensity that bordered on supernatural, locked onto one person and one person alone. Marcus Reeves. General Morrison crossed the marble floor with purpose, each footfall a sharp declaration. He halted precisely 3 feet from Marcus and executed the sharpest, most respectful salute of his entire military career. It wasn't the routine gesture offered to fellow officers. This was the profound acknowledgement a warrior gives to living legend. "Mr. Reeves," the general's voice boomed through the vast space. "It is an absolute honor, sir." He held the salute, his bearing radiating reverence. Marcus gave a small, tired nod, the simple acknowledgement of a man who had moved beyond ceremony long ago. Only then did Morrison lower his hand. He turned to address the stunned crowd, his voice carrying the authority of a lecturer at the War College. "For those who don't know, let me provide context. During conflicts this nation tried to forget, there were missions never recorded in official files. Deep penetration operations in hostile territory, executed by small units that officially didn't exist. These men operated as ghosts, going where others couldn't and doing what others wouldn't. Their casualty rates approached 100%. He paused, letting the weight settle. These units had no formal designations, only legends. The most effective, most feared, and most decorated was a five-man team known only as the Vipers. His gaze returned to Marcus. This man didn't just serve in that unit, he created it, led it, and was the only one to survive it. He holds the Distinguished Service Cross, 3 Silver Stars, and a Navy Cross awarded in a ceremony so classified the president wasn't present. His operational name, the name Enemy Intelligence marked as their primary target, the name that saved an entire battalion of Marines trapped in the Asho Valley, was Iron Viper. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones rose openly, recording history. Lily stared at her grandfather through tears, finally understanding the depth of quiet sadness and immense strength she'd known her whole life. Then Marcus placed a gentle hand on the general's sleeve. "General, let the boy be," he said quietly. "We were all young once. The uniform is heavy. Sometimes it takes time to learn how to carry it with grace."